So, would you like to be referred to as Monica, ML, Miss Bullock, Mrs. Bullock?
Hi.
Doc?
Just Monica's fine.
That's fine. All right. So, I guess first and foremost, you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right. My name is Monica and I write under the name of ML Bullock. I live in South lived. Oh my god. I live in South Mississippi and I write ghost fiction.
Are you in Lucedale area?
I am actually. I'm in George County. I'm in the Rocky Creek area more specifically, but yeah.
Best catfish house on planet Earth. Right.
That's what everybody says. I'm just not a big catfish fan, but everybody says that it's like right next to my house.
Well, what about the Landmark Cafe? You ever been there?
Of course.
That's
Downtown Lucedale's really come up.
It's such a like preserved little like Americana town. So like if you picture in your mind like what did America look like when Route 66 was still a major highway, like that. That's the best way I know how to describe it to people. It's a very beautiful little area, especially in stark contrast to right across the border in Alabama, where it's not as well developed.
I used to live in Theodore, so I know all about it.
So for some context for people listening, we're going to be talking a lot about the Southeast and the Gulf Coast area. That's a big part of your work has been the Gulf Coast Paranormal series. I'm actually about halfway, maybe just over halfway through the Gray Lady of Wilmer.
Wow. Okay.
The reason why I picked it is because obviously I grew up in that area. So between that story specifically centers around people want to pull up Google Maps, Mobile, Alabama, the county, and then you go north of there, there's Wilmer, Alabama, and then I grew up between there and a place called Citronelle, Alabama. And
I know where it's. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So when you're talking in that story specifically about Highway 98 or Bloody 98, or as it's called nowadays, Moffett Road, which leads straight into Mississippi, that and then the highway or lot road that goes into Citronelle north, and then Wilmer Georgetown Road, which is pretty much that's the entirety of the what we call the Wilmer area. When you're talking about those specifically in that story, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like so. But for our listeners, hopefully they can pull up Google Maps while they're listening and try to put a cognitive map together. It'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, cool.
So, ghost stories. I recommend anybody who's listening to go to your website, which I'll link in the show notes, and they can listen to your talks about like writing. I know you did one really great podcast that was specifically about your authorship career. But I kind of want to start with when did you first become interested in the paranormal?
1976, and I was living in Perry County, Ohio. That's when I started my journey. So, like a lot of people, it started from an experience, and when you're 10 or close to that, and it's the 70s, and the only thing you have to learn about ghosts is Scooby Doo. And you're being terrorized at night, your bed shaking, and you're so much so that you're getting in trouble from your parents because you're running across the floor, but you're not running across the floor. And so it started in that year. Is when it started.
So had your family moved into a new old house at the time, or how did this come about? If you don't mind sharing.
I don't mind. I just don't want to. I don't want to like jeopardize all the time here, but just to try to keep it short. My dad was in the Navy. He was in the Navy. He served he was a SEAL for a long time. He did demolition diving, and we always lived around beaches and the ocean. And my dad got in trouble. He got in an argument with a senior person, and he was taken off the beaches and sent to Ohio to recruit for 2 years to teach him a lesson. But anyway, that was in the 70s. Things were very different then. But anyhow, so my parents bought a colonial 2-story, very small, in Mount Perry, Ohio. And we were excited because it was the first 2-story house we'd ever lived in. We always lived on bungalows at the beach or little shacks or on Navy housing. So this was a big deal for us. And I think the first month, everything was great. But then things started slowly to happen. It started with the footsteps walking up the stairs. and then they're walking across the floor. And then things started getting misplaced. Like my parents would find the keys in the freezer or find mama's hairbrush in the bread basket or just things like that. And naturally, I'm the 10-year-old oldest. So I'm the one that gets, you did this. And it wasn't me. But eventually, everybody realized what happened because everyone had an experience with the house. And from there, it really wrecked my mother's mental state and it wrecked our relationship. But yeah, it just slowly progressed over the years and kind of snowballed into other things for me. I pursued that whole spiritual side because I had that early experience. And when you don't have guardrails and you don't know how to learn about this stuff, you can get in a lot of trouble. So I did that.
Something that I actually had a really in-depth conversation with my father about maybe a couple of years ago. But I think that our generation has so much access to information because of the internet, et cetera, and we're so used to it and we take it for granted that it's really hard for a lot of people my age and younger to put ourselves in the shoes of what it was like to. So in the 1970s, back in the 1900s, folks, thinking about things in terms of like you literally don't know anything, any information at all that your parents, a friend, your teacher, or the preacher didn't tell you.
No,
And the only way out of that is to go to the library and just consume information. And it's not, you can't Google it. You have to know the Dewey Decimal System and pray that they have something that's even akin to what you're looking for. And on top of that, just to add another layer to it, there's no review system. There's no like, oh, this got 5 stars on Goodreads. It's just like, oh, this is the only book in the library about ghosts or about anything other than just what's on the news.
exactly, exactly. And luckily for me, my mother was a big fan of books. So once I cleaned out the school library, reading everything I could about it, she would take us to the regular library. And it's so weird because when we were going through it, my parents didn't talk about it to us, and we didn't really talk about it to them. But all of us were experiencing it. It was just weird. It was just a different time, you know. There's a lot of things you didn't talk about in the 70s. But yeah, the just slowly progressed. We had an incident that happened before that. My dad had rented a house before they bought the house in Ohio. We found Ohio very spooky. We were in Lancaster, and they rented a house. It was just a little cottage. We were going to be there for a few months till this other house came through. And my mother had a profound experience with there. We found out the lady that lived there before us had got shot and was murdered, a home break in. And this woman really loved Elvis Presley records. And when we got there, the only thing left in the house was this awful red carpet and a record player and a stack of little Elvis records in the closet. And over the unfolding months, as we were waiting for the house to get ready that we were going to move into, my mom was playing these records constantly, 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 weeping and crying. I got scratched and stuff, but I never thought about it as being paranormal until years later. And but that my mother found out that the woman had gotten killed, and she claims that she saw the woman. And then so we stayed at a hotel until we could get into the house. But yeah, it just I don't really know if it happened from that house and just followed us to the other. But the big stuff happened in the colonial house in Mount Perry. That's where the big stuff happened.
So I'm reading a book called Real Ghosts by an author named Brad Steger, who, at least in my understanding, is quite the authority on a lot of this stuff. He's passed away now, but a lot of the stories that have to do with malicious spirits tend to focus on things that do follow people from house to house, either based on an object or an attachment to a person. So, one of the things that I'm really genuinely curious about is your opinion on the poltergeist debate. Do you feel that, first of all, this noisy spirit that was in your house, like, would it have indicated to you things that people would commonly associate with poltergeists, or was it something else, perhaps?
That's a great question. I've never even thought about that. Um, to What I saw wasn't a poltergeist. I mean, I don't know what a poltergeist would look like. I mean, I now have seen plenty of mediums work, and I am a medium, and I think that's why my mother was gifted, but she was raised in a very strict Pentecostal oneness religion, and of course, she was put on the altar to pray the devil out of her because she would know things ahead of that time, or she would get warnings, or and I think that just drew my that it was attracted to my mother, and then later to me. But anyway, back to your original question. I think there were poltergeist elements to the story, poltergeist elements to this experience, but to say that it was strictly that, no, because I saw something, and my mother saw something, and my sister saw something, and we all saw something different. So I'm not really sure how to even say it. I'm not even sure to what to call it.
Did you find it to be malicious or just annoying?
At first, it slowly built. It built. It was like, at first it was just, well, that's curious. I know I didn't leave that there. Or why am I getting blamed for this? Or, blah, blah, blah. But it slowly became curious, draw your curiosity. And then it became more of, for me personally, obsession because I'm getting spanked for walking across the floor and I'm not. But my sister and I shared a room, and our twin beds were on either side of the room. And whenever she would say, I see it floating over you, or I would feel it, or it's jerking my bed or shaking my bed. To me, if it's shaking my bed and it's grabbing my feet, if it's trying to drag me out of the bed, I don't think of that as being friendly. I think at the beginning it was friendly or at least calm enough. It didn't just come out with guns blazing. It was just like draw you in, draw you in, draw you in. And then it just kind of built up and just blew up and it was just horrible.
It's very difficult to tell the difference. I mean, obviously, from our side of the coin, especially the people who are not like gifted as mediums or whatever, they don't see anything. It's really difficult to tell. But I imagine in my mind that a malicious spirit will appear as many different things because it's just trying to fool you. It's trying to lie to you and try to like make you buy into whatever it is that it's doing, and whatever it has to do to either control or scare you, it would do. So, for instance, people, I don't recommend this disclosure. Anybody out there listening to this, for the love of God, please never touch a Ouija board in your life. But if you do, they obviously it's going to lie to you about what it is. So if you're like vulnerable and you're looking for your dead relative or a friend or something like that you've lost, of course it's going to tell you whatever it needs to tell you to get into your life. And I find that terrifying. But in terms of something that's haunting a home, do you find that, because you said that it appeared to you and your mother and your sister in different ways,
Mhm.
what did it appear as, or was it like sort of localized to that individual or just random?
Wow, great questions. For me, it turned out to be like a goblin. It sounds crazy, but that's what I saw.
Mhm.
What I learned was, and I had looked and ran and just studied everything I could as 10-year-old girl. And I read in a book, and I couldn't even tell you what the name of it was, but that if you could, if when you hear the footstep ghost, because I mean, back then I didn't know what a poltergeist was. There was nothing like that. I'm sure the Warrens were around, but I didn't know about them. They weren't coming to Ohio. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that.
It's okay.
I saw it as a goblin. It was purple and black. It was on the steps. And the book told me that if I heard the footsteps, if I could catch sight of it, then I would see it and it would be gone. And for me, that's what happened. But the activity still happened for my sister. She saw a woman that was in Victorian dress that floated around the house and liked to choke all of us. And then my mother never would say what she saw. So I don't know what she saw, but I know she saw something.
It's one of the hard things about this entire like the entirety of this is a research field. Is it's so hard to, even when you're going on eyewitness testimony, it's hard to get a lot of people to even speak, and a lot of people who do have experiences will not speak up because they're afraid of what other people will think of them, especially where we're from, where it's predominantly very old school in our religious standpoints and opinions about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm very opinionated about it, so much so that it costs my husband his church. It cost me, it cost us a lot of heartache. But stick to my guns, and I love helping people. I don't charge them for that. I go to their house, I pray with them, I walk around the house, I work with the spirits if I can, if it's a human spirit. If it's something else, my husband is a minister. I'm an ordained minister. I mean, we can command. All right, we can command it to leave in Jesus' name, but you have to wear it down. There's certain things you have to do to protect yourself. To determine whether or not it's a ghost or it's a demon. And there's a lot more in the realm of the astral, if you want to call it that we access through dreams, and we access through witchcraft, and we access through prayer, and we access through all these different doors. And the thing is, you need to go through a valid door wherever you're doing research or you're doing investigating. Whatever you're doing, when you approach the paranormal field, it's important to have your game face on and be ready, because you just really don't know what's on the other side of the door. You really don't know.
I want to circle back to specifically the topic of like just differentiating ghosts and demons, or spirits and demons,
Okay.
and also astral project. We'll get into all of that, but for now, I want to focus still on the question of poltergeist, because I don't know why I've been obsessed with this recently, but it seems like there's a big debate within the community about how to define what a poltergeist is. In German, it literally means a noisy ghost, like just a ghost that's loud and annoying and bothers people.
Right.
But I don't know if the scientific definition or whatever is still heavily debated as to whether or not it is a spirit, or if it is a gifted child who is subconsciously acting out some frustration they have.
You can put your mind at ease. The bottom line for poltergeist is it has to have a human agent. So poltergeist is it has to be activated with a human agent, whether it's known or unknown. And that's somebody that's known they're gifted or not known they're gifted. The poltergeist is activated with the human agent. So, whereas if you were at a haunted location, a haunting, a residual haunting, or something that happened at that location that's repetitive haunting, you could go at 11 o'clock, 11:14 every night and presumably see something at that time or whatever time. But you don't need a human agent there, somebody interacting with that haunting. But with the poltergeist, you do have to have a human agent. They're the ones that give the entity power, knowing or unknowing. They're the ones that can take the power away, knowing or unknowing. So that's the difference about the poltergeist. They work with the human agent.
There's also a lot of association between epilepsy and poltergeist hauntings. And I don't know if that's just a correlation or if there's anything practical to it, but I found that very fascinating as well in my research.
That is very interesting, especially in terms of the pineal gland and the third eye. And that would go line in line with that, because I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, epilepsy is about shorts in the brain, like electrical shorts, isn't it?
I'm really not qualified to speak on it, but my understanding is that it has a lot to do with your neurotransmitters.
Yeah, that's what
So
I'm
like
thinking. That would go
either
right in line with. Yeah, absolutely.
dopamine or serotonin or norepinephrine or something like that.
Brain juices.
Yeah, brain juice. That's good. We'll have to get a T-shirt that says that. Sell it on your website. Yeah, I just found it so interesting how like there's such disagreement even amongst the experts about. I mean, that's in any field that you're going to have, physicists arguing between string theory and whatever else is going on, Newtonian physics. So it would make sense that in this field it's the same. People are going to have disagreements. But I do find the idea of like poltergeist being attached to a person interesting. So my opinion, at least based on like what I've learned recently, was not necessarily that it doesn't have to be a spirit present at all. It could just be that someone is like has some sort of telekinetic ability and isn't aware that they're acting it out, and it could be temporary. But it seems like it gets particularly nasty when a person who's going through that and isn't aware of it meets a spirit. So if
Mhm.
there is something in the house and you're doing that, and then the spirit gets pissed off at you, feel
And if
excuse my
you're
language.
and if you're a certain age.
Mm,
So all of those things are that's why it's important if you're going at this as a researcher, it's important to take every case as its own case. You can't just say, okay, this is poltergeist, this is that. Sometimes it can be two or three things. Sometimes it can be an actual you and throw a holy angel in there who's trying to stop people and is telling you to get out and everyone's thinking it's the devil. I mean, sometimes that happens. So it's just you gotta every it's great that you're learning the basics, but just be prepared that even if you learn the basics, there's no guarantee that you're going to learn everything. And you're not always going to be, you got to go in every paranormal situation. If you're doing it in live time and you're helping people, or if you're doing research or whatever, you got to go in every situation with being prepared. And that comes through a lot of different things. But yeah, you got to know where the entrances and the exits are. You got to be prepared spiritually. You got to be prepared physically. And so there's a lot that has to go into it. But yeah, I love that you're finding that and discovering that. And I did not know that about the correlation between, or the possible correlation between epilepsy and poltergeist activity. That's very interesting.
yeah, I don't want to spread misinformation. Or if you're out there and you have epilepsy, like please, for the love of God, talk to a doctor first before you go to your priest or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean
I wouldn't
it's
even worry about it. There's no need to go anywhere. It's really, it's just, I mean, if it's bothering you, but learning how to, I think people learning how to ground themselves
mhm.
to stop that is really important. You know,
Yeah, it's one of our coworkers at our company in the Keep is he has epilepsy, and I'm always like trolling him, essentially saying like, "Oh, dude, it's the poltergeist that lives in your house. I'm telling you, if you would just get rid of that thing." But it's just a running joke. But I do find it very fascinating, and the categorizations of different things that people interact with is also very interesting. Uh, just to as it correlates to video games, there's a game that's very popular right now. Alex, what's it called? It's like a really long word.
ouch.
Goodness, I'll edit it in if I can't remember it in the course of this conversation. But essentially, you and a group of people are, paranormal investigators. You go to different houses and you have EVPs and different tools and everything. And your job is to figure out what kind of thing is haunting the house. That's the name of the game. And it's really interesting because people have put a lot of thought into this. Um, so like one of the things that has fascinated me the most recently was what like in your opinion what is a shadow person, and is it a lot of different things? Thank you for listening to In the Keep. Please consider taking a moment to leave a review, comment, a like, and subscribe on your listening platform of choice. It really helps and it's greatly appreciated. If you really love the show and want to see it grow, consider supporting us via Patreon. Supporters get episodes early, exclusive content and updates, chances to ask questions to guests, access to In the Keeps video games, and whatever else I can do for you. Every little bit helps. This podcast directly supports my ability to do what I love the most and to take care of my growing family. You can find links to everything that I'm talking about here over at inthekeep.com. Thank you, bless you, and enjoy the show.
Uh, a shadow person is a lot of different things. It's actually like three different things. And I don't know how deep you want to go with this or how long we have to talk, but
I'll talk to you all night.
shadow people are people say shadow people because they're perceiving manifestation of an entity as a shadow. Okay, that's one. Two is cryptids, and three is really, really bad, big bad voodoo daddies are shadows.
Mhm.
And people that say, "Oh, it's the Hat Man," no, dude, that's horns. Those are horns, and they'll often show up as hats because they're trying to hide that from you. But so shadow people with horns or showing up with a coat and hat is like an arc demon. If it's just a shadow entity in the woods, or if you're doing cryptid work, sometimes they'll step in and out of the realm if the being is multidimensional. And then you have the hauntings where people are in a home and they're seeing a manifestation of either a ghost or whatever, and they're perceiving it as a shadow. So there's three different ways that you can perceive a shadow being, and you'd need more information to determine what type of shadow person that is.
Just talking about like bestiaries, you'll often see these broken down into shades. There's so many different words, and in different cultures they call things different ways. I've certainly heard many stories about the Hat Man. I was a big Art Bell fan, if you remember Coast to Coast AM. So I got a lot of that in my ears. And I agree with you. I don't think I don't think it's a good omen when you see something like that.
No, run the other way as far and fast as you can. And if they're coming in on you during your sleep, you really got to put some boundaries up and,
Mhm.
push them back, because once they start interfering with your sleep, insomnia is horrible. I've had it and it's bad. The insomnia from that is bad. So,
Uh, so I guess we'll start with the cryptid point of view because I find that really fascinating too. So transdimensional beings, or one theory that I've heard about this particular manifestation is that, I mean, basically human beings. We were talking about electrodes in your brain. This is something I learned on Wikipedia, so it's probably not true, but essentially we function at about 60 hertz, which is probably what your computer monitor functions at. And we're receiving things at about 60 frames per second electronically in our minds. Of course, that fluctuates up and down, just like everything else to do with our bodies, but that's about where we sit. If something exists on a different frequency than we do, and occasionally we cross paths with that, maybe we're seeing something that does exist all the time, doesn't interact with us, but you're just seeing it.
mhm.
That's possible, or at least it's been put forth that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But what do you think, uh, from a cryptid standpoint? What is that people are seeing as a shade or as a shadow in the woods?
I think you nailed it. I think it's a frame per second. Like,
Okay.
just, quick, fast movement, and it's the stepping in from the dimension. Like you mentioned, and I've heard this other way of explaining string theory. You mentioned that before.
Mm.
They're just it's 2 dimensional, 3 dimensional. It's very different the way that we perceive things, and even understanding what the fourth dimension would be, even understanding what a fifth dimension would be. Those are so hard for us to put our minds around, but that in fact is real. I mean, it is in fact the possibility of it is real. If you don't even want to go that far. I go to this is an example I give to people when they're like, well, if it's invisible and I can't see it, I just don't believe it. Well, if you've ever stepped in a room and people were arguing in it, even though you didn't hear them, you felt it. How many times have we stepped into an arena or into a group or whatever, and we're like, were y'all just talking about me? Because we picked up on that. Because there's a lot of information being given to us. Like you said, there's a lot of information that we're perceiving with our 60 hertz or megahertz or whatever. But we're perceiving and processing constantly, and not just with our eyes, not just with our ears, but with our skin, with our breathing, with all sorts of parts of us, awareness in us. And so, you know, for me, the cryptids is a frame by frame thing we're seeing. They're stepping in and out. They're hiding. They can do that. They can do that. And if you want to talk about origins, we'll get really deep. But I do believe in a pre-Adamic world, and I do believe that a lot of things that we do see are shades and shadows of what that was. And to know that and understand that is virtually impossible in this, but doesn't stop us from looking, does it?
Well, I'm 100% on the same page as you in terms of there's clearly more to reality than what we can conceive of. We know that inherently. We know that we don't perceive time in as a dimension. We move through it linearly, or at least we experience linearity in time as humans.
Right.
Um, But of course, like you said, you can walk into a place and if something happened there before, even if it's years before, if you walk into a house where a murder or something really dark happened, or if you walk out onto a battlefield from the 1800s, you
Mhm.
feel that. And a lot of people, I think, are in denial about it. They do feel it and they don't realize that. In fact, we could have a whole different conversation about. I think we're like a species with amnesia. Like human beings in general, have latent senses that we've let go or atrophied over time, like a muscle you don't use. Um, yeah, I mean, and a lot of people have different gifts. Some people are more attuned than others, but that's also true of sight, sound, of the senses that we do have, right? So one thing that's really, I'm not going to say it's proof positive, but it's a good example of you don't have a sense for this, but it is real.
Right.
Radiation, like you could walk into Chernobyl right now, walk straight into it, you won't feel a thing. You will come out with radiation poisoning,
Mhm.
and you won't know it until it happens
Right.
because you don't have a sense for it. That doesn't mean it's not real. I mean, the Ark of the Covenant gave people tumors. That's in the Bible.
Mhm.
If you're a Christian, you kind of can't circle around that.
Right.
Whether or not that means it's radioactive, I don't know, but it does mean that there are things that happen that we don't perceive.
Right.
So it's to me, when I was younger, I was much more rigid. I think I was very scientific. I still am to a large degree. I mean, I was professionally a meteorologist when I was in the Air Force. So I'm used to thinking about things in terms of like strict data, what you can and can't prove. But that doesn't mean that just because I can't prove it doesn't mean it's not real. 500, 600 years ago, people didn't believe that America was real and they didn't know the earth was round. And we're still in denial about that. So,
Are you following Travis Taylor's work with Skinwalker Ranch?
Travis Taylor sounds very
I think
familiar.
it's Travis Taylor. What's Travis's last name? He's a doctor. He's got like 3 degrees, astrophysicist.
Travis Shane Taylor, American scientist and engineer.
Yeah.
I think I saw him on a documentary by Dr. Stephen Greer. May have had him on
I
there.
I have a very I have a friend that knows him. And this man has so many degrees, and I don't know what I should say or what shouldn't say, but he's being challenged. Let's just put it that way. A man of science that knows so much and has so many degrees and is a part of NASA, part of space technology. I think he's probably even SpaceX now. But he is being forced to tout the position that there is dimensional travel happening and not from the stars, from here, like dimensional.
If you really subscribe to the idea that we live in a projection, like I'll tie this into video games for my audience too. Let's say that we live in a, we call it simulated reality, and I think that the Matrix metaphor does work for a metaphor, but is not necessarily exactly true. But if we exist in a projection of, I don't know, the eight-sided crystal or whichever version of it you want to call it, you could say that we live in higher and lower dimensions in terms of like the biblical sense or like a Dantean way of viewing it. But it's strange how all of these things seem to correlate, regardless of what we call it.
Right.
Um, but it would seem that we are coming. If that's true, then everything is local to one point. And then the reality that we experience in 3 dimensions or in 4 dimensions, if you want to throw time into the mix, uh, it even if we perceive it as distance or height or a difference in time, it's still localized to one point from which it is being projected. So in a video game, if you were to break out Super Mario World, you could conceivably run into a glitch where an enemy that doesn't belong in that level is there, or it, stalls the game, or you can jump up into the clouds and you can, run across, and then all of a sudden you've skipped the entire world.
Right.
And conceivably, you could do that in real life as well.
Mhm.
So, just as we were saying, if there's a glitch in the matrix and you see a shadow person who's existing on a different frequency than you do, uh, there's no reason why you can't. If that exists in a simulated world and we live in a simulated world, then why wouldn't that be possible in our world? Um, I remember talking about. I think I had this thought occurred to me when I was maybe like 9 or 10 years old, because I was playing Mario and then I was explaining to my grandma, like, I think that's what ghosts are. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of it.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, from a scientific standpoint, if this gentleman's talking about transdimensional beings traveling from place to place, uh, have you ever studied like ancient Egypt or Samaria at all?
Hold that thought. Do I know Egypt? Well, actually, you know what? All of my Egypt stuff is in there.
Okay.
I have written so many books on Egypt, and I have a series that's a fictional series about Akhenaten,
Mhm.
and but yeah, I from a very early age loved Egypt. There's so much Egypt in my soul, and yeah, absolutely. I think it's those people really were in tune to the world around them, and I mean really around them. And I find it fascinating some of the stuff, the two Enochs and the different things. I mean, there's just so many rabbit holes we could jump down here.
Uh,
Don't even get me tiptoeing on the edge of
we,
Egypt.
we can do bunches of different episodes if you want to.
Oh
But
God.
like we could talk about Jesus, fleeing and learning the mysteries of the Egyptian mystery school. We could get into all that stuff. We'll keep it focused on what we talked about. We would talk about today, and then we could do another one later if we want to. But specifically for me, I got really fascinated with Thoth, the Atlantean priest king, or Hermes, the Trismegistus, or whatever you want to call him. But the idea that he could be in several different places around the world, or even not on this world at once, seems so pseudoscientific to our modern way of thinking about things. But I loved the series in the film Stargate, which was tying a lot of Zechariah Sitchin's work into what
Right.
people thought about Egypt.
Mhm.
But let's just say for it, that the pyramids are some sort of space dock or beacon or whatever, and that gets into Enoch, that gets into Ezekiel. Ezekiel is so fascinating too. Just
It is
the
very
end.
fascinating. It's interesting because we just passed the Lion's Gate. And the Lion's Gate is where the belt of Orion is positioned over the pyramids. And you know that they're like aligned perfectly.
Mm.
The third one's just a little off center, just like the belt of Osiris. But I even included that in one of my books, mention of that, and how the ancient Egyptians used to call him the dancing man. But anyway, very interesting. Very interesting.
So with that said, you're I don't want to say it's your assertion, but what we were just talking about in terms of like being able to travel, if you were actually existing in one local place, like so, if if those things are true, then if someone could access the source, so if you could go back to the source of the projection and then put yourself out into another area that is part of the projection, you're never really leaving the place. You're just folding space time, as a lot of physicists would try to put it.
You are, but you're not.
Right. Um. So like for instance, there's the theory that there are pyramids on Phobos and on Mars itself.
No, I've
Uh,
heard that. Yeah.
and there's also the pyramids in Antarctica that are discussed a lot. Now, I don't know if any of that's necessarily true. People can mess with images and say a lot of misinformation. But I also think that you studied Kabbalah, I'm sure, at some point.
Here and there.
The tree of life, right? No matter what culture it is, has the two pillars on either side and the one in the
Right.
center. So you have intuition and you have knowledge or logic. Thoth. The word thought in English comes from Thoth. Um, Hermes being the god of in Greek mythology of logic, reason, thought, knowledge. Mercury being the Roman manifestation of that. And then on the other side of that, you have Venus, who is emotion and love. Jupiter also, in astrology, these are all represented as well.
Right.
And the key to life, according to Jewish Kabbalah, is the center, to be balanced between the two. So if you're trying to, like, I don't know, live a life of balance and try to ascend, you can't be totally emotional and you can't be totally logical. You have to be somewhere in between. I think that, at least in my experience, that if we are, um, we are far too logical as a society. Like we lean too much on what we can and can't prove and not enough on our intuition. So if you have if collectively as a human race we have the intuition that there's something about Phobos that's important to us, it's worth investigating. Uh, and I think that's also true of our paranormal topics here. So like if so many people intuitively believe in spirits and ghosts, regardless of whether or not it's provable in a what we now call scientific way, doesn't mean it's not true. And I do think that there's merit to it. And the balance between that, like the pendulum is sort of swinging back societally right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right. And we can look back on history and we can see where we kind of went off the track and we did go towards all for science. And we did abandon intuition and inspiration and imagination because all those three things are the three eyes that work together, you know.
Mhm.
People are like when you're a child, they want you to be an imaginative child, but they don't want you to be an imaginative adult.
Right.
But you need to be imaginative because you have to be able to be a visionary to be able to do these kinds of things and to study these kinds of things. And so I think it's really important to do that, you know. Like you said, if it interests you, you should research it. You should check it out. There might be something there that you can pick up, that you can learn about. My son and I were talking about the concept of time the other day. He's 24
Mhm.
and very deep, very spiritual man. But he was talking about, we were talking about what if each one of us is our own main character and all of our family is just NPCs and they're just interacting with us, but we're really here by ourselves.
Yeah.
But we're all here by ourselves and we're all in it, you know, it's just like it's a way of there's just ways of thinking that some people are not ever going to engage in it. It doesn't matter how much you want society to be more spiritual. You have to abandon your passion for trying to convince people and just convince yourself and not worry about other people because it's so frustrating when you've experienced all these things and you witnessed all these things. And the very same people that get in trouble are the ones that are going to pick up the phone and call you. At the same time, later on, they're going to say they never did that. You know, they're never did that. They never called you and asked you to pray for them. They never asked you to come and sage their house. They never asked you to anoint their doors and windows, but in the end, they will. That's how it works. So people can choose to not have a spiritual life, but spiritual life is going to present itself to you in some sort of way. You're either going to smother it with booze and alcohol and pretend it doesn't exist when it wants to appear in your life, or you're going to embrace it, explore it, and determine how it fits into your life. So, spirituality is a part of life. And I think you're right. We are coming into a time where people are starting to think more, they're having more leisure time to think more about themselves, about their place in the world, place in the universe. And I think we're stepping back into that. And the reality of so much that's happening that is paranormal. Um, yeah.
It's really, I didn't plan to go on that tangent, but since you brought it up, I think it's really normal for people who have like a natural affinity for like a greater sense of sixth sense, whatever you want to call it, to go down the path because we are taught in society so much that you have to, as an adult, repress that. It's not okay to think that way. It's not okay to have these ideas that you can't prove, and you're insane if you do. That people drown it out with hedonism, drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it is. I myself, I believe, and I've been told that I'm a natural empath.
Mm.
Maybe that's why I'm so good at conversations, or like that's why I went down this path in my life. But I spent a very long time drowning it out with drugs and alcohol. Like that was the only way that I knew how to shut it off because it was so I wasn't taught how to deal with it, so it was overwhelming, and B, because I thought I was insane for thinking it.
Wow. And you know what? That's so sad because every single one of us has a sixth sense. Every single one of us. I
Mhm.
mean, how many of us have, if you've ever had a dream about flying, if you've ever woke up falling, if you've ever, I mean, these are all things that we all share, all that are just outside the realm of understanding, you know, and we all do that. So you have to, Ty. You have to just like not worry about convincing the world, and you have to go on your own trek and your own, and it sounds like you're already doing that. You're well into your journey. I feel like you got your staff, you got your stick, and you're well into your journey, but don't get distracted by trying to convince the people around you. I lost so much doing that. I lost my church. I lost family members. I lost friendships. And I'm, as another paranormal person, looking out for you, a little older than you. I'm just telling you, don't feel like that's your mission to try to convince everybody around you. You be the pilgrim. You be the trailblazer. You be the pioneer. And you don't worry about what other people have to say or think or do. They want to pray for you? Great. They want to do whatever they do? Great. That's great. But just don't get hemmed up in that, because that will steal a lot of your zeal, a lot of your energy. It'll take a lot of your joy away from you when you're trying to learn these things and trying to figure out who you are and your place in the grand scheme of the universe. You have to just abandon that. I feel like that's like part of who you are. You like want to teach, you're educator, you want to struck because that's who you are. You like that. But this may not be a field where you can really embrace that as much as you want. Maybe you can. Maybe you're the one to do it. I know I wasn't. And it cost me a heart attack. I lost my best friends. I lost a lot of stuff, all because I'm a Christian and I believe in ghosts and they don't.
So one of the things about you that is fascinating is that instead of being a nonfiction ghost, you know, like I was talking about Brad Steger earlier, like he basically like died with a lot of people just calling him an idiot because he
I know
couldn't.
who Brad Steiger is.
Steiger, my bad. I'm not.
It's no, you can do it either way, but I from being up in Ohio,
Yeah.
Steiger, I picked it up there.
So
Yeah.
but I mean, a lot of these people who do nonfiction end up just being dismissed as pseudoscientists, right? But in your case, you write fiction. And so to tie that back into Christ, even never once told anybody anything definitively. He just told parables and stories. And that was his way of getting it across.
He did tell you. He said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. That's what he said. He said to adopt his blood sacrifice because humanity, and this is really weird, but humanity is contaminated. Our DNAs are contaminated. We are contaminated. We had to have the blood of Jesus to make us completely human because
Okay.
we were not that. And look, God tried to do that before by taking the Nephilim out, but they still managed to come back in. And so now here we are again. It's happening again. And those of us that are awake, we have to be awake. We have to understand these things. We have to perceive that it's a blood war. It's a blood fight. It's what it's all about.
I find it so interesting how, there's this entire section, I think it occurs in multiple different gospels, but specifically in the book of Matthew, where they're coming to the apostles and they're coming to Jesus and they're saying like, why don't you just outright say what you're trying to say? Why do you always speak in parables?
Parables.
And he says basically like, because they won't understand if I do.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I were to just come out and say how I feel, so to rewind back to the empathy or empathic thoughts thing, I remember telling one of my friends, because we were sitting in a room and there were other people around, but they weren't in the room with us. And I was saying, like, if we just walked out there and started telling everybody, like, hey, I can feel your feelings, even though you're not telling me what they are, they would call you crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can explain it to someone in a way that they understand, the same way that you teach a child, you don't tell a kid all of the like harsh reality of the world. You tell them a story that they can understand and conceive of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that people are blind, and I think that in his particular case, there are different interpretations, of course, but third eye blind, as in people who aren't aware of their spirituality, is a lot of what he was trying to get at. And that occurs in so many different ways. But to back up to your point about the Nephilim, I wanted to touch on. So if and this is all a matter of your opinion or your expertise,
Right. And let's just go ahead and put this out there.
Yeah.
I was saved. I'm just so people will know a little bit about, I'm not just talking out my armpit.
Uh-huh.
I am 57 years old, and
Congratulations.
thank
57 years
you.
young.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel it. I look in the mirror. I'm like, who is that old lady?
Mm.
But anyway, I, you know, I don't know how to say this. I don't know. Maybe I just shouldn't say anything.
Well, let me ask the question, and then if you comes to you, that's cool. If not, we can cut, edit it, whatever you want to do. Um, so earlier, and you said something akin to like everyone has a sixth sense.
Yeah,
I'm not convinced everyone is a person, and
I agree with you.
so in terms of like like just specifically Nephilim, like people who are even we were talking about the shadow person, which we probably need to get back to at some point, but now I'm bringing it up. Um, so like if you're like a true sociopath, as in you do not feel human empathy, or you literally hate humanity. And I think that there's not it's a spectrum. So there's people who are more or less, I think to a degree. I could be wrong. But that seems to tie into the at least the metaphor, even if someone doesn't want to literally believe it, that's fine. But like the idea of a Nephilim, of there being these things that are, the word often actually hilariously gets translated into giants. So then there's that there were once Nephilim on the world, and that gets translated from Hebrew into um,
Right.
English as there were giants.
I know what it was. Go ahead.
So, but giant literally means of the earth,
Yeah.
and Nephilim is by definition not earthly.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
No. That was it. That was my whole point.
Okay. I'm writing something down because I don't want to forget to tell you this.
Mhm.
Okay. So anyway, back to my qualifications because I had went on a tangent in my brain. I was going to tell you something, and I need to tell you privately.
Yeah.
But anyway, something I'm picking up from you. But good thing. Um, but anyway, so yeah, I got saved in the 80s. I was I have a book out there called Deliver Me from Evil. That's my really own one of my only nonfiction books is my story, Deliver Me from Evil. All my fiction stories are the ghosts that I've met, put them in fictional stories and give them a chance to tell their story. That's it. And that's why people say to me, your stories are so real. That's because I really met a ghost in Wilmer. And that was the ghost that I wrote about. Now, are the details exactly the same? Probably not. But I got what I could from her and I understood what she went through and I put it in the story. And she's not forgotten. So that's what you got to learn how to do. But you got to do it for yourself and for your own purpose.
Whatever happened to the good old days when computer role-playing games spent more time telling great stories than stressing you out with season passes and needless grinding? Call of Ragnar is our effort to bring back the best in RPGs. Play in the immersive world as two friends adventure into a murder mystery that lands them in the middle of a battle between gods. Head over to callofseregnar.com. That's call of SAREGNAR.com for more info. Be sure to wishlist on Steam. That's why I was saying what's so fascinating about the fact that you write primarily fiction is that you found a way to talk about the subjects that you want to talk about and to tell the stories without being I don't like it when someone is standing on a podium.
Right.
Nothing against preachers. I mean, like I'm talking about something different, but like being preachy as in
I know
dictating
what you mean.
because as you said earlier, you can't convince somebody who isn't ready or doesn't want to be convinced
That's
of something.
exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. But you can like if you present it to them as something they don't have to take too seriously, they can arrive at their own conclusions. So
Exactly. Let them do their own. You know what? And you don't know. I don't know everything. Sometimes the other person has insight.
mhm. I think that it's important for my medium, for podcasting, for this sort of thing. It's very important to me that I never come across as the authority person. I am exploring as many different ideas as possible. So today I might be talking to you. Tomorrow I might be talking to a priest, and I'm just trying to get all the different pieces from every perspective that I can and then arrive at for me, my own conclusions, but also for the audience to make sense of it however they want to.
Okay.
So I think that it's important. Like, so the best podcasts or the best radio show hosts or authors that collect data in any way are the ones to me that present it in a way that people can decide for themselves. Because otherwise, it's sort of insulting to the audience to tell them what to believe. It's like, no, just present them with the facts. So if you're watching the television news and they're telling you, I don't know, about politics or something like that, and there's like, there's only one way, that this is the way, and then the other side is like completely the opposite, but they also, are saying this is the only way and that you have to take it this way.
I just wanted to give the people listening why I feel like I can talk about this, because I went from that little girl in Ohio having that experience to having a mother that had a mental breakdown, that just was mentally crushed. A lot of things happen all together. I'm not going to get in there and talk about her shame. She's not here anymore. It's not. There's nothing to be ashamed of, but she felt it anyway. So, but yeah. After that, I was a teenager. I was very abused. I got involved in witchcraft. I did all that stuff as a young person. I did all the bad things. I went to Salem. I became a dancer. I worked in the adult entertainment industry for 10 years. I was the best at what I did. I was strung out on drugs and I got put in jail with 27 felonies. And that was my first time getting in trouble. And boy, did I do a good job the very first time. And so I was in jail for a whole month and I was coming down off of drugs in jail by myself in the late 80s or early 90s. My dad would not bail me out. He's like, nope, you're going to sit there. And I'm glad he did, because a church came through there. And I had been there for 4 weeks. The fourth week, I was going before the judge. The church had been there every week, but I wouldn't go because I just wasn't a religious person. Come on, I had a spiritual side to me I didn't think the church had. So I just didn't go. But
Right.
Anyway, so I did go that last Sunday before the Monday that I was supposed to go see the judge, because I thought, well, if I could get God to put a little word in for me. So I went in there and come to find out, I actually had an encounter. I had I got baptized with fire, like hit the top of my head, went out my feet, and everything that was attached to me just got burned off. And it was amazing. Then I got out of jail and my dad wouldn't let me come back home. And I didn't really want to go back home. I was still looking for drugs. So I piddled around for a few more years before I got saved. In 1997, I got saved for real, for real. And I've been sober since then. I've been straight since then.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I love God, serve Him with all my heart, but it's just not in the way that I would have imagined.
Mhm.
But I say all that to tell people that I went to Bible college, I went to Bible school, I did all the things. I was a children's pastor for a decade. I was on the praise team for 20 years. I did all those things. I was involved in my church. But when it came down to getting help with the paranormal, they just were not equipped to do it and they were not open to talking about it. And when I talked about it, I was deemed possessed or whatever, everybody stay away from her. So it just kind of pushed me out. And they couldn't tell me, you can't tell me any different. I know what I experienced. I know what children in my children's church experienced. I prayed with them about the thing under their bed and about the thing in their closet. And I tried to talk with their parents, and say, hey, you really need to tackle this. This is a problem. Oh, it's just, whatever. No, it's not. Your kid is really telling you they have a problem. But, my passion is for people that can't take care of themselves. Kids, women that have no skills, no life skills, people that were trafficked like I was. Not all of that was willing. A lot of that was I was captured and was not willing, but I was captured. So, what are you going to do? But
A lot
anyway,
of hedonistic behavior is not like there's the balance between free will or whatever, but I feel like a lot of it is people just feel trapped in the situations that they're in. Like it's hard to blame someone when it's like they don't know any better or can't think of a way to get out of the situation they're in, or can't, if they're, as you said, like if you're being trafficked or captured or whatever. But it's more than just the physical reality of what you're dealing with. It's also like the spiritual battle within yourself. Like, what do I do? Something we were talking about earlier is kind of your baptism by fire. I mean, there's that old country song where he says, some folks get spiritual because they see the light, and some because they feel the heat. And I think that the vast majority of people that I've met who have gone through that process of being saved or being a born again, any religion, Christian, Muslim, whatever, tend to come from a place where they got into a very dark path, and then they got to, people in AA say rock bottom a lot, and then you have that transcendence. But that's part of the hero's journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as immortal beings trapped in mortal bodies,
Mhm.
we have to, and I don't know how we do it without sounding religious. We have to tell people that this blood needs to be applied to them because you are an immortal being and there is a life after this that you want to be a part of, but it takes that blood to cover and to repair the DNA damage. Here's something interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I know this is a little off topic, but when a woman marries a man and
Mhm.
she's with a man, the woman's DNA changes. Do you know that? She adopts some of the DNA from her spouse or her partner. So a person that has multiple partners is actually a bit of a chimera, a soulish chimera, because they're a collection of all of the pieces of the people that they've been with. So it's important. It's important that we remember as we go through life that we're an immortal being in a mortal body. And I know that's hard for a lot of people, but I guess the older I get, the more it's, I know it's true. And, I want to help people to have that immortal life. I don't mean, like singing on a cloud with the angel and the tinsel halo. I mean, there's a savage world ahead of us. And there's a lot of things on the other side that we're going to be doing. He said we're going to be priests and kings. Well, we can't all be on this planet being a priest and king. We're going to be across the galaxy. I feel like God's plan for us is huge. So, anyway, sorry.
That's so fascinating from the standpoint of, because it's not something I really thought about myself in depth. But
Think about it. You said
yeah,
you'll do it. You'll get it. You'll understand it. These things are real. The whole reflection of Noah, and I know we're getting off topic, but the whole reflection of Noah, he was perfect in his DNA. If you do the Bible study, the blueletterbible.org, and
mhm,
do the study, the word study in Genesis chapter 6, do the word study, and you will see that it's not that he was a perfect man and he was a perfect Christian. His DNA was perfect. Him and his family were the last ones. That's why God had to put them on a boat and preserve them because they were the only 100% humans.
it's really funny that you are actually saying this right now, because just last night I was listening to a whole series about Noah and his descendancy from Enoch. So, in I don't know, as a person of faith, like, do you think that the Book of Enoch should have been in the canon
Yeah,
of the
I do actually. I think a lot
the
of them should have been in there.
Mag-
Jubilees,
Mary Magdalene?
Susanna, Joanna, all those books for people to determine for themselves, not the Council of Nice or, the Trent meeting, or I can't even remember what it's called now. I'm so out of Bible school.
Yeah.
But, those things were determined by other men. I would rather have here's what I don't get about Christians. We will go to Tacitus and we will study Tacitus. Tacitus was alive, I think, in 70 BC or 80. I can't remember. Either side of the zero, he was 70. And he wrote a lot about the Caesars. He wrote about the fall of the Roman Empire. Christians will read that and they'll accept that Tacitus was alive in 70, and I can understand and believe and trust that Tacitus wrote this. But they can't understand and accept and believe that Enoch, the grandson of Noah, wrote the book of Enoch.
Great
And
grandfather.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that. Make it make sense, you know?
I think it's very interesting how people it's the term in not Scientology, psychology is cognitive dissonance, where it's like you have two conflicting beliefs, or you can accept one thing that logically pans out with something else, but you can accept the one but not the other.
Yeah.
And this plays out. Every single human being is guilty of this. It's not. I'm not putting anyone down, but it's, for instance, just in the Old Testament, you have all these people up to Noah who live for 900 years, something like that.
Right.
And then now we only live a certain amount of time. And then the, if you really want to get deep on that, it's because there's the idea that the Anunnaki had a lot to do with it. And that goes way deep into Egyptian and earlier Sumerian and Akkadian spirituality, which I think is, for me, I think is all connected. Like I think
You have the angels that fell, then you have the Nephilim, then you have the Rephaim. So you have, and even today, like you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, that there are people walking around this earth that are not people. And
right,
you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's why you don't know who you're laying down with. And you don't know who you're having babies with. And you don't know who you're interacting with. So you got to be honed in. You got to have that balance. You got to know. You got to have your eyes, your spiritual eyes on. You can't do it all the time. You got to take breaks, especially when you're learning.
if
But
you're
it's important.
genuinely tapped in, I feel like you even if you don't know it on the surface, you know it in your heart, like in your soul, you'll feel it. Like if you're with the wrong person, you're with the wrong person.
Yeah.
If you're doing the wrong thing, you're doing the wrong thing. What's harder to figure out is what the right thing to do is, at least in my experience. Like, if you're, let's say you're in an unhappy marriage, you're unhappy. You might convince yourself, like, oh, well, I'm staying in this for these reasons or whatever, but like, you're not happy. And in general, I'm not saying like immediate happiness, like in terms of like straight up hedonism, like immediate gratification.
You're not
But
talking low vibe. You're
right,
talking high vibe. Yeah.
I'm talking about like in yourself, like who you really are. Like when the universe is not rewarding your bad behavior.
And what's that called? Intuition.
Right.
That's something we all need to tap, like you're saying. We got to lean into that, especially nowadays. Just like and it says this also in the chapter 6. In the days of Noah, and also after that. Even on these times, That's why we're seeing this uptick and all this interest in paranormal activity. It's because there's more of it happening, and there's more of it that's going to happen, and there's more things that are going to happen, and people are going to be like, "Oh man, what's going on?" And some of us will know, and some of us won't know.
So I guess the next logical step is to ask you, when people, or when they are a person, like a human being who passes away,
Mhm.
and then their spirit resides on earth, like it stays as a ghost. So this, in my experience, like I had an experience where there was a man who lived in the house that we moved into,
Mhm.
passed away, and he's still there, or at least for me, it seems like he's still there.
Mhm.
I don't, at least I have not yet seen a ghost, but I feel like I feel a presence,
You
and I can,
have to Ghosts are not to be seen or to be perceived.
okay.
Sometimes you'll see them, but those are rare, and they don't usually happen at the beginning of your awakening. They usually happen when you're more advanced.
I like that word awakening. That's exactly how I described it. Like opening is also
Yeah, absolutely. And then any awakening, that's really important to tap into that.
Mm.
So many times I go to talk to you about something, it's like my brain just goes empty. I feel like you're picking up my thoughts before I get a chance to tell them to you.
Well, that's probably not the worst thing in the world. We're tapped in. The important thing is that we verbalize it because it's an audio podcast.
Yeah. But it's like there's so many things I want to say. It's like you're talking and like it just goes right in my brain. And I want to just share all these things with you because it's so rare to find somebody that wants to talk about the deeper things. And,
Something I was frustrated with in your other interviews is that they didn't seem to want to get past the surface level of like, oh, you're spooky, huh? Well, tell me more about, like, not that that's a bad thing, but it's like, I genuinely am curious. Like, what do you think? Why are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering now which interview you saw. The one guy was he was in the LMVPN publishing company that snagged all my books for a few months till I changed my mind. But I got interviewed by him, and he was just blown away. It was the beginning of COVID, I think, or it was before COVID.
This is the 2017 interview that we
Okay, yeah, that was before COVID. He was blown away that I was a Christian and doing ghost stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay, the Bible says, and I think it's in Mark
Mhm.
16, it's Jesus says, he's given us, he's given us the ability to discern spirits. If there were just demons, why would we need to discern anything?
Right.
Okay, everything we don't see is a devil. Everybody got that? Okay, we're clear. That is not what Jesus said. Human beings are spirit, soul, and body. Okay, this is Monica 101. This is what I've learned in the almost 60 years that I've been on this earth. So I'm just
Mhm.
going to tell you, you can take what you want and toss the rest away for all the listeners and anyone that wants to critique. Spirit, soul, and body. So the body passes away. It's cremated or it's placed in the earth or whatever it is, your tradition that your family does.
Right.
The soul of the person is anchored with the body normally. The soul is your personality, the things that you like, all the things that make you, that make you unique. They usually go dormant or they can occasionally pop up, but they're with the body. The spirit, however, can do a lot of different things. And that's going to depend on the state of the spirit of that immortal person when they separate, when the three chords are separated. So if the three chords are separated and the spirit is marked by the blood of Jesus, then that spirit is going to travel to him and he'll send it somewhere else to do something, or you'll be with your family or whatever you guys work out. There's a lot of different things the Bible describes and other written texts describe that can happen, but it's all good and it's all good, good, good. So that's happening. And also a deceased person, if their cord is with the spirit, then they can come back to us in dreams and visit with us in dreams. They can interact with us. Most of the time, the Holy Spirit doesn't like to pull a person together with their loved one if it's 6 months or less, because there's like a transitional time and you have to give them the time they need to make that shift. It's not just you making a shift, they're making a shift. And you can pull them back. Your love, the love that you have with your loved one, keeps you connected with them for a very long time after they're dead. And you're always connected, really, but just in different ways. So the spirit that is redeemed is with God for his purposes, and you guys are working out what you're doing. The spirit that is willfully serving the archons, the devils, the demons, the dark side, whatever, willfully, I feel like are restricted in a holding pattern until a day in the future.
Mhm.
And we know what that day is, probably. And then the third thing is the person that's not purposefully, and this is where I lose a lot of people, but they're not purposefully serving the archons, the demons, the devils, the whatevers. But they also didn't make this relationship with Jesus or party because they didn't understand that the immortal life that they had inside of them was paramount to this encounter. So I personally believe that the grace of God meets them and they have a conversation and they have a decision to make. That's my opinion.
So the to finish the question, because that was really fascinating. Like, and it's almost like like you were saying earlier, like you knew what I was going to ask before I asked it. But like, what? So when someone doesn't make that step into the next life, the afterlife, heaven, the whatever you want to call it, um, is that is the process of mediumship, like when you are, let's say you're going to a house and you're confronting a spirit that hasn't moved on and convincing them to go into the light, so to speak, is that asking them to make that decision for themselves? Or like, because I've heard a lot of people say that it's because they don't know they're dead or they don't realize. But in your experience, what is it that prevents them from moving on, and how do they move on?
There's a lot of things I've
Yeah.
found, a lot of things. One thing is I don't aspire to this. I think you can die suddenly and be confused by it, yeah. But for years and years, I don't know that that would be the case. But anyway, I feel like that when you're snatched out, there you go again. It's like gone. My answer, just
So
gone.
when you're snatched out of your life, right? So if you die very suddenly, like let's say it's
Okay.
an unexpected accident or a murder or something like that,
Right, right, right.
you'll have people
Okay.
who stick around for a bit, and then so
Well,
it requires them to be convinced, like, hey, you're dead, by the way.
that's where purgatory and people have the name for that. That's what that comes in. For those of us that do investigations, we go into places where there's been residual, there's active, there's whatever. But yeah, absolutely. Man, this is just so crazy to me. You got to learn to tamp that ability down. But I imagine your wife must be plumb frustrated with you sometimes. Just like she's like standing there trying to argue with, going, "What the hell was I saying?" You
Her name
know,
is Faith.
huh?
Her name is Faith, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe that people can come back and stick around because the process was interrupted. Someone tried to communicate with them too quickly, and it's taken a little longer for them to do the process.
Mhm.
There are things that happen on the other side. There's things that happen. There's interactions that have to take place. There are prayers that were made and promises and covenants that have to be fulfilled. You have to interact with people on the other side. You got to have a conversation. There's a lot of things. So a person that's lingering, they either are in a purgatory state, they are confused, or they are reluctant to go. And as a medium, if I've determined that it's a human and they're not crossed over into a paired situation, because there are humans, there are dark beings, which I'm just going to put everything under,
Mhm.
there are angels, and then there are pairs where a human is paired with a demon or a human is paired with whatever. That can happen a lot in death. Like if you die as an addict, sometimes unfortunately the soul is captured by that addiction. And that demon is allowed to drag that soul around because the soul was captured and it's in a state of captivity when it surrenders the third chord. So it's with the demon. But as a medium, I can come in there and do warfare with a demonologist or an ordained minister that believes in demons, because that's important, and I can go in there and have a discussion while he's pushing back the darkness, and I can talk to them and oof, chill bumps, and help them get free. And then immediately you have to shut the door. I mean, immediately. You have to purposefully do it. You have to say it. You have to speak it. You have to be on purpose when you do this kind of work, and it's really dangerous. So one time at my church, we had a young man that came in. He was in his 20s. He's struggling with an addiction. He came to the church one time. We got to minister to him, to be with him, to love on him, to get to know him. We hung out with him afterwards and chatted with him. He was going to come back that next Sunday. Well, he got murdered. And instead of seeing him Sunday, I came home and we didn't know at the time that he died. But I dreamed about him. I'm like, why am I dreaming about this kid? He's screaming in my face. And I wake up and he's still there screaming in my face.
Mhm.
And then my husband, who's a pastor, comes in there and he's like, who is this person running around the house? Because my husband doesn't see spirits, but this guy was connected to my husband because he came to him before he died. So I'm like, I think I know who it is. And then I got the call from a church member telling us that this young man was dead. So I said, well, I know what we got to do. And so my son was there, who's also, I told you, a man of God. So we were there, they were praying. And my son's like, Mom, I don't know what you got to do, but you need to do it fast because this thing is coming in hot. So it's growling. You can hear it with your ears while I'm dealing with this guy. And he steps over, and it was amazing. Do I know what happened on the other side of that door? No, I don't. But I can with full confidence say that whatever happens on the other side of that door is just, and whatever happens on the other side of that door is what needs to happen. And I never promise the spirit, or the ghost rather, I never promise a human ghost that they're going to go to heaven unless it's a child. But most of the time, in my experience, I don't meet children.
Right.
Children are not lingering. If someone's telling you that Sally or the children are child, it is not a child.
That's exactly what I think. I think that it is very common for something that is malicious to want your, like I said earlier, like it wants your sympathy.
Mhm.
It wants to convince you that you're doing the right thing by letting it in. And that's
Yeah.
all. That's such a those words are so common when it comes to anything to do with demonology,
Mhm.
because anybody who's even read the first book on the subject would know you
Yeah.
have to invite this into your life. Addiction, it can manifest in so many different ways. So like, don't take this, for the people listening, strictly. If you're not a spiritual person, fine, that's cool.
Well,
Anything in your life at all that is negative, you pretty much have to allow it to begin.
some degree, yes. But if you have the missed opportunity of moving into a property
Right.
where somebody done some junk that you didn't know about, then you may have activity that you did that isn't merited to you. It's not karmic, but it's happening to you because it happened in that location. So I agree with you 100%, except for the caveat that it can be location based.
So on that note, places that are haunted by malicious beings that aren't summoned by the person, in question, like the victim in this case, does this typically come about because someone was dabbling in something they shouldn't have been, or like a heinous act happened? Like how do you think that that occurs?
To be honest with you, most of the things I encounter are really ancient
Mhm,
and they were already here.
mhm.
But people activate them in different ways. They can do it through music, they can do it through spells, they can do it through sex magic, they can do it a lot of different ways. I mean, I don't want to empower them, but there's a lot of ways that people can bring those things to light to bring them, give them power. But it's going to take your soul, it's going to take your life first, you know, just I don't get. So weird. It's just so weird. People will spend their life for a little bit of power in this mortal life when you're an immortal being. Come on.
It tends to happen from desperation. In a lot of cases, it's not. I don't think it's someone who's necessarily inherently evil, but they're desperate.
Oh,
You
I've
know,
met some inherently evil people.
oh, for sure, there are those. There, or we say people, but as we said earlier, they might not be. If you're truly, truly evil, purely, then if there's nothing in you to be saved, are you really a human being, or are you something else? Or are you
That's a
represent?
$1,000,000 question, ain't it?
Yeah. Um, I don't know, and I can't prove it, but I would
I'm
say
not going to pretend I know.
to back that up a little bit there. A lot of people who make deals with the devil are people who are sad, desperate, lonely, whatever, and they're hedon. They're the sin is hedonism. They are looking for immediate gratification. Go ahead.
That was me.
Me too. I mean, I think
What I
everyone
did. That's what
goes
I
through.
did. And that was so hard to shake. I'm telling you, I was saved and still couldn't get rid of it. I mean, I was saved and it was dormant for years and years, and it just came back to life after I got married, you know. And I was a Christian and I was serving in church, and I don't understand, I don't understand. Well, rebuke it in Jesus' name. Well, I did that. Well, use oil. Well, I did that. No one told me I had to renounce him. And that's where the freedom came, is I had to renounce that covenant. I had to renounce that thing that I offered. And I had to just put it in, and I had to immediately I say, I renounce this contract, this agreement in the name of Jesus, and I call the Holy Spirit to come in and be my lawyer. I'm not dealing with you. And you got to do that again and again and again and again and again, because they'll come back again and again and again. But eventually it'll stop.
Well, the devil's the world's greatest salesman. I mean,
He didn't
that.
even have to sell me. I was stupid. I was high as a kite,
Mhm.
facing jail. I made a deal in the dark, didn't think anybody heard me, but he did. And it cost me.
It's very interesting how that comes about. I was talking earlier about Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM radio show is my hero. I even have his signed book right next to me. But he did an episode about he wanted to hear from callers who had made a deal with the devil. He's like, if you've ever made a deal with the devil, I want to hear what you did, how did you do it, why, all that sort of thing. And almost universally, it's from people who are nihilistic. Like, so they don't. It's not like they like I want to make a deal with the devil. It's like they don't believe that the devil exists. They don't think anything matters. So what do I have to lose by saying something like, "Oh, come on, I don't. Yeah, give me $1 million and I'll give you my soul. Who cares?" And then they don't realize the consequences of doing that because they didn't take it seriously. So it's like, as you said, like no, I wouldn't say you're stupid, ignorant, naive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 18-year-old, 19-year-old,
Mhm.
strung out on drugs, 20s, 21, 22. I mean, absolutely stupid. Hedonistic, very much so. Lived a hedonistic lifestyle. Money fell through my fingers.
Mhm.
I was singularly popular, of course. And you are when you're running with drugs and criminals. But here's the thing, a lot of us don't make these deals for $1 million. Like you said, we make it for stupid things, or we don't really believe that it's an actual thing.
Mhm.
But it is an actual thing. There's always someone listening. Always. Always. That's why in an investigation, like if you're going to help someone or whatever, and you get in there and someone in the home starts parroting back something you said earlier, you're not dealing with the human spirit.
If you love this show and you love supporting indie video games, please take a moment to check out In the Keep's upcoming Stellar Valkyrie. Built in the GZ Doom engine, this retro first-person shooter puts you in the universe of space bird bounty hunter Falco, who is on a mission to save his ex-girlfriend from the evil Black Star cult. Just type birdgame.space. That's BIRD game.space into your browser, hit enter, and smash that wishlist button. And stay tuned. And now, back to the show.
You're dealing with a demon. And so those things know they're not with you, they're not omnipresent or omniscient, but they travel and they listen and they'll come and see what you're coming for and they'll take a look and hang around. So, word of the wise, they are listening always, always. But the good thing is the angelic realm, which we didn't really talk much about tonight, but the angelic realm, which was just as expansive and somewhat creepy in some ways, but in a good way. But there are dragons, there are elementals, there are fairy types, there are all kinds of things that God created that are barricaded off from us for now, but they are there. And, sometimes people slip through, things slip through, people interact with them.
Maybe that's a good place to kind of like, because we only scheduled 2 hours today. We could definitely do more because I feel like we could talk forever. But
Yeah.
briefly, the reason why I think um I get so fascinated with the darker side of stuff is because I'm always met with, like, anytime you're curious about this stuff, you're met with this idea that being educated on it inherently means that you're a sinner or that you're going to be possessed. And priests, especially that deal with exorcism, tend to say things like, don't like you should know that demons exist, but you shouldn't know anything about them. Like you don't want to. And I'm of the opinion, and I could be convinced otherwise, but I've always been of the opinions like you need to know your enemy. Like, so if I was going to, like, I don't know that I would ever do this, but I was like, if I was an exorcist, I would want to know which demon I'm dealing with. Like, I would want to know of the Key of Solomon, which one is this I'm dealing with, and I would want to be able to figure out which one it was with data, like with information about what sins do they attach them to, what kind of promises do they make, how do they get manifested in the first place? Because if you're trying to figure that out, it would seem like you'd want to know. Like if you walked into a person who was doing a seance or a ritual to try to summon something on purpose, and there's a specific way that they do this particular entity, or if they do it by accident because they didn't know what they were doing, which is more often the case, I think. I would want to know what you're up against. But there's so much pushback against knowing these things. Like, like Aleister Crowley, I mean, obviously he fell into a really dark life at the end of it, but, a lot of the work he did, I think, was worth knowing, or at least worth being curious about. And
It's the guy that goes astral traveling and
yep,
gets caught out.
yeah.
You know, I'm telling you what,
I
that guy,
think of him like we lost a soldier on the battlefield with that guy.
we lost a lot of information.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I mean, I don't know if I would say he's on my side or the other side or someone else's side. Here's another thing, there's not just two sides.
Mm. Mm. What
So
do you mean?
there's two basic sides, but on on both sides you have factions.
Right.
So like in our mortal realm of believers, and like you say, priests say, or pastors don't like pastors in my case, your case, priests or whatever, but would say, don't study that. Don't even fool with that. But they're learning what was said to them.
Right.
But all that is to put control on people. That's all it is. It's and in a way, it would if the information fell in the wrong hands, maybe they would hurt themselves. But you know what? They're going to hurt themselves anyway. You need to teach them how to protect themselves. That's something that they need to know. They need to know.
I think it's really profound that you say that there's multiple factions and there's also multiple entities, or at least, if you're studying this stuff at nauseum, it's going to come up at some point, whatever people,
Absolutely.
yeah. But like Christians almost always, um, at least on the surface, like your average everyday like Christian will conflate the devil and every demon into one thing.
Hmm.
And of course, they're all connected, but like if you're dealing with Beelzebub or you're dealing with like uh I don't
You don't
know.
got to name them.
Yeah,
I get it.
right. It's different than if you're dealing with
Another one. Yeah.
the big dude downstairs like himself or what. I would imagine that there's a different way. They
Absolutely.
have different wants, they have different motivations.
And it's going to, at that knowing, sometimes though, to get the name of that thing, you got to be out on the property and you're going to have to be there for hours and hours and wear it down with EVPs, and you got to wear it down. You got to get out of here. You got to go after it. And once you know what it is, you'll get the name. And then when you have the name, you can use the name and command it to leave. But unless you know the name, you're not going to be able to command it. If it's something that's summoned by a witch, the chances are you're probably not going to know the name unless the spirit gives you the name. A Holy Spirit, by the way.
Mm.
Or, well, I'm just going to go with that because that's what I work with. I can't approve of the other stuff. I don't know. But for me, in my case, if it's the Holy Spirit, he'll give me the name. Or if it's a name that I don't need to know, he doesn't give me the name, but gives me the authority to command it to leave. And I do that and put up either barriers of some sort.
So I guess toward the last 20 minutes or so here, we can focus on the other side of things. So
Okay.
angels, what are they? How do they
Angels
how do
are
they
so
manifest
awesome.
themselves?
Angels, something I've learned later in life, and I can't even tell you where I picked this up from, but I've proven it's true. Um, all the names of God have an angel attached to them. For example, in I think it's Isaiah, which is my favorite Bible book of the Bible is Isaiah. But Isaiah and John, those two resonate with me, and then Enoch, and then others that I read. Um, but anyway, please don't take my thoughts.
I'm not.
I'm just falling into the hole. I'm tired. But anyway, as I was saying, what was I saying?
So you were talking about your favorite book was Isaiah, and
Oh
we
yeah,
were
yeah,
that was
Isaiah.
to
The
did
angels.
yes.
Every name in the Bible, like Vanquisher. If you look up the Vanquisher, when you call on the name of God with that name, there's an angel attached to that name that responds to that name. So if you're like, oh, Vanquisher, come and save me. Oh, Vanquisher, come and save me. And we get told you can't be repetitive. God's not going to hear your repetitions. Well, it does help sometimes, or people wouldn't be praying the Hail Mary, or the Rosary. But it does help. It helps you focus. It may not move the spirit more, but it helps you. And that's what's important because you got to connect. So for angels, connecting with angels, getting to know the names of God, there are angels associated with those names, but a lot of times those names are hidden and they're only in the esoteric writings. So you may not know or understand those names. A lot of the angels' names are hidden from us because God knew that some of us would want to try to command them. And we're not to command them, we're to work with them. We can ask them for help. Often I call on Michael, the archangel, when I'm doing serious, big, bad, voodoo daddy, battles. When I'm dealing with something bad, I'll call on him or others. And so there are names that you can call on. I have been to an investigation before where there were two parts of the haunting. One was outside and one was inside. Inside the haunting was human spirits, but they were on the crux of becoming inhuman. That can happen too. But anyway, that's a subject for another time. But so human spirits can just, if they're evil and they continually evolve as evil on the other side, they can become that.
Right.
They can attach to that, and that's their identity. But, angels calling on them, working with them, like Joshua, he's like, "Who are you? Are you with are you with our enemy? Or are you with us?" He's like, "I'm not with either one of y'all. I'm with God." So we have to have that mindset. Again, it's not just God and the devil, it's not just light and darkness. There's factions, and the angels are a faction of the light side. Now, in that angelic realm, there are the traditional archangels. There are the cherubim, which are the protection angels, mostly over holy relics like the Ark of the Covenant or in the temple. And there are other classifications. There are dragons that are holy. There are lions that are holy. I've seen so many different ones. And they interact. And people have angels. My son, one of his angels looks like a lion, and so we joke a lot about when we see a graphic of a lion because we're like, "Oh, your angel's here," and so he's encouraged by that because he sees that. But they really are around us and interacting with us. We just don't look for them. We look for the darkness because we don't feel that the light is more exciting, or we're not as intrigued by the light. But the light is also can be very terrifying. And sometimes when you step into an environment where there's a haunting, or you're told there's a haunting, you have to know in your mind and in your spirit that sometimes when it's a holy angel, you'll also get that feeling of dread.
Mhm.
That feeling of dread will come from the other realm, no matter what it is. It could be around your bed at night, angels that's stopping by to heal you for something or to visit you, or someone prayed over you and they're coming by to check on you. And you happen to wake up at 2 in the morning, you're like, "Oh, I don't like this." And it wasn't anything bad. It's just that you were awake and you were able to perceive the presence of this terrible s- angel. Terrible, I mean, as in they promote terror in us because they're fully immortal, whereas we're these immortals housed in mortal bodies. And so our response is different. So, what else do you want to know about angels? I'm not sure what else to.
So there's so much to talk about in that regard, but like for instance, the depiction of angels, because you brought up lions and dragons. Often the dragon I would conflate with the serpent, but you see these depictions that are like the head of lions, dragons, bulls or boar or whatever like that, and then a human, and they're all conflated into one. Or the Sphinx, I think, is another extremely common example. Even the Ark of the Covenant is described as having two sphinxes facing each other. And I think that the symbols that each of these things represent are quite interesting. I wonder if that's born of human understanding from Earth trying to project our ideas of something from nature onto something bigger than ourselves, or if those symbols are handed down from the top.
Yeah. Personally, my personal thoughts are that there were watchers before there were angels, and watchers, which were a different class of angels. There were a teaching angel, an educational angel. A lot of them were here from what I study. Okay.
Right.
And I could be wrong, but from what I study, a lot of them were here in ancient Egyptian times, and they were teaching and they were interacting, and the people they shared these uh, encounters with art. So we have the constant of that, and I think that the earth was ruled by the watchers, and that you could say that there were little g's and little g's goddesses. You could say that
Mhm.
the Bible does call the sons of God. Who is he talking about? He's talking about the angels, because only Jesus is the actual heir apparent. But there are all these angels that were created by God, because unlike human beings, each angel was created individually. There are no mass iRobot angels. Okay, I'm gonna do 10,000 of this and 10,000 of that. No, every one of them is a separate being. It's a beautiful, it has its own talents and its own abilities, have their own language, their own height, hair color. They have all of that, all of the wonderful things that we know nothing about. That's all entangled in the angel world, angel realm. So our interactions with them are limited, I feel like, and not as accessible as the darkness, because God is more protective of his secrets. And also, there is a requirement to accessing those beings. There's a requirement. And I don't mean anything religious, but I mean, you got to be at a place inside of you that you can interact with these beings. Whereas if you're just going to Waverly Hills to encounter, you know, a dead crazy guy or maybe a demonic presence or whatever's lingering around, you don't have to work for it. But whereas if you want to encounter an angel, or if you want to have an angelic encounter, or even a Jesus encounter, or a realm encounter where you're just in that realm, you can have those, you can pursue those, but it takes work to get there. And people don't want to do that. They'd rather just, experience the paranormal the easy way, which is by grabbing our K2s and our digital recorders. And I'm just as guilty. I love it. But, it's different.
Why do you think that Michael and Gabriel are so intrinsically important to people?
Because they were featured in intrinsically important stories. I mean, they're both messenger angels, and they play a role in the past. And if you were not a religious person and someone that just reads the Bible and just studies on your own, you'll know that they also are involved in end times activities. So you'll see them again. And I think people they're used to those names. So we've seen them in Christmas plays, we've seen it, we're familiar with them, but we're not so familiar with Uriel. We're not so familiar with Raphael or, all these other ones. So, yeah, I think God just keeps his cards very close to his vest. I think this realm is very protected. I think it's like Mossad.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know anymore. My dad was a SEAL. In my day, to me, the SEALs were the top guns because, that's what I grew up with. I
Do you know
love
what
those
team he was on?
SEALs. Huh?
Do you know which team he was on?
No, I don't. And
Okay.
he's gone. Oh, my dad scrubbed out. He had a blown eardrum in the third year. So he got put in electronics. And come to find out, my dad had a natural skill to break codes. And he didn't even know it. He was put in as a code breaker.
A
And
cryptologist.
yeah, he would go to all the bases that were getting closed, and the government would send him and pimp him out to other governments, and he would close their bases. But he did all that stuff. He did all that. He did all that with paper and pencils and teletypes before computers. So my dad did all that stuff.
That's very cool.
My dad taught me how to fight because I'm like short and small, and he's like, "Girl, you're short and small. You're always gonna be short and small. Here's how you fight. Number one, grab a handful of dirt. Teach your daughter this. Number two, sling the dirt in their eyes. Number three, pop the hell out of them and run for your life." And there you go. So that's what the Navy guys taught me.
Well, thank you so much for all the time and all of the insight and everything. This has been really really eye-opening, honestly. It's not the kind of conversation you get to have every day. And especially in the context of this podcast, a lot of it is very material, very much about things that go on in computers. So it's nice to get the metaphysical side of things as well.
Oh, I definitely brought that. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. That's what I wanted.
Okay.
And I hope that we can do it again in the future as well.
Absolutely. Just holler at me.
So first of all, let's make sure people know to go to mlbullock.com to get all of your books. It's all on Amazon, but I also noticed a lot of it is available in audiobook.
And I'm going to do this for your listeners. If anybody wants a paperback copy of Deliver Me from Evil, I will be happy to send them that for free. They can just email me at authormlbullock@gmail.com. I should have asked you this first. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Plug it all you want. The only thing I don't recommend is to give out your,
I'm not
your
doing
address.
that.
Don't put a return address on it.
No. My address is not on that envelope. Trust me. I've had some weird encounters.
Especially when it comes to like spiritual things, because people will get very passionate and do a lot of crazy stuff.
Yes, I know. Trust me.
What else did I want to say? Oh, next time we have to talk about King Arthur. I know that you did like the whole Pendragon series, and I am upset. The Once and Future King is my all-time favorite.
Oh my God, I love it.
So
Have you read Lawhead's Merlin?
Merlin? Yes.
Taliesin, Merlin, Arthur.
You're gonna have to give me a reading list of. Yeah.
God, Taliesin is so good.
Yeah.
That's Merlin's father. His mother was Atlantean, and Taliesin is, oh man, this so
Yeah, we'll have to do a whole another thing on like the angels and the involvement of the quest for the Grail and all that stuff, because
you just holler at me. I'll be glad to talk. I'm good at that.
Yeah, well, let's do that.
Right.
But for now, you have a good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thanks to Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Bye, y'all.
God bless.
God bless you too. Bye.
Thank you very much to Monica for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. It's like super cool to get to talk about those topics that I think a lot of us avoid to a large extent. And I hope that I get to do that a lot more. I think that we're definitely going to have her back on. Anybody that remembers Art Bell, he would always have Linda Moulton Howe on for like everything. We need someone like that probably for In the Keep. Let's see. I want to say thanks to all of our wonderful supporters over on Patreon. If you're a paid member, you do get a shout out on the podcast, just letting you know. So I want to say thank you to Shannon, to Michael Klaus Schmidt, to Frederick Schreiber, to Brad Carney, to the wonderful Dots OA, and the great and powerful Bridge Burner. I really, really appreciate all of the help, and just so y'all know, man, this show is not just a side project anymore. This is what I'm doing to a large extent, as well as working on In the Keep stuff. So we got games in development, we got this going on, and this is my enterprise. I hope that you will support it. You can go find everything you need to know at inthekeep.com, all of the latest episodes, any updates on our games, articles, links to all the different ways to support. By the way, you don't just have to support through Patreon. You can make like donations and stuff. There's links on there too under the support tab, or whatever makes sense for you. I'm down for it. And also we have a merch page, so just click on the merchandise thing, grab a t-shirt, something like that. We are gonna have all new merch very soon, so if you want that beautiful red octopus t-shirt, get it now before it doesn't exist anymore. Just saying. Much love. I love you. Pretty sure God loves you. Till next time, stay in the keep.